There are lots of elements of They Live that can be taken as indications of a more delicate, subliminal structure beneath the cartoonish fun, yet the often sloppy approach to how some scenes are scripted and directed suggests a lack of such subtlety, so we have to consider the evidence carefully. I noticed at the start of the movie that the film was produced under a company called Alive Films. They Live produced by Alive Films, it sounds like a statement, doesn't it? Except They Live sits chronologically in the middle of approximately a dozen movies produced by that same company, so the name comparison appears to be a happy accident. On the other hand, Carpenter has been very open about the basic social and political message.
Made towards the end of the 80s, and I was reflecting on a lot of the values that I saw around me at the time, mainly inspired by Ronald Reagan's conservative revolution. There was a great deal of obsession with greed and making a lot of money, and some of the values that I grew up with had been pushed aside. So I decided to scream out in the middle of the night and make a statement about that. And They Live is partially a political statement. It's partially a tract on the world that we live in today. And as a matter of fact, right now, it's even more true than it was then.
Interesting that Carpenter was so bold in conveying the message within the film and in interviews, yet he disguised his own authorship of the script behind the pseudonym Frank Armitage. It's possible that this was motivated in part by his desire to distance himself from any critical backlash the film might receive. The mind control plot framing of the film is synonymous with the notion of mass hypnosis. In fact, in the original short story and comic version, the aliens are called the Fascinators, indicating that they control their human slaves through fascinating sensory illusions. The lead character is awoken accidentally when he attends a stage hypnosis show, in which the command "wake up" has the unintended consequence of waking him too much. He then receives a hypnotic phone call from his local police chief, telling him that because he's too old, he is commanded to die at 8 o'clock in the morning of a heart attack, hence the title of the story. After giving everyone a wake-up call on TV, he does actually die of that heart attack, so the hypnotic death command worked on him, even though he was apparently woken. And during the midsection of the story, he has to turn away from some of the messages he sees because he can't completely resist the hypnotic induction. Hypnosis is a subject very widely misunderstood by the general public, and so it's something that provides fertile ground for psychological fiction stories to flourish, stories such as They Live. It works quite well, being that the mystique of hypnosis is combined with the mystique of what an alien culture might be capable of. Here the hypnotic command, "sleep," is slowly mumbled through a loudspeaker, and the word itself is all over the billboards. Of course, there's a hell of a lot more to putting someone into a trance state than simply telling them to sleep, and something not very well known is that sleepiness isn't the only type of trance state a hypnotist can work with. In fact, any physical and psychological state that falls considerably outside of the subject's usual state of mind can be considered a trance. For example, trance music, or if someone's conscious attention is intensely fixated on a particular thing to the exclusion of everything else, which is what happens when we watch an engaging movie, then that's a trance state. Ever notice how kids get so engrossed in TV shows that they don't hear you call out their name? Or even being drunk or stoned, those are trance states too. I don't think that author Ray Nelson or John Carpenter did much in the way of research on hypnosis, being that the verbal commands conveyed in the film would in some instances fail. For example, you can't command someone to experience no thought. The mind isn't like a computer that can be switched off. To have no thought would completely paralyse a person and make them unable to do anything, not even slave tasks. There is the command "don't question authority" in some scenes, so that's a fair bit more specific. However, the subconscious doesn't process negatives. If you say to someone, "don't question authority," they have to think about questioning authority in order to understand what you've just said. So a better command line would be something like "believe authority," or to use a mind control command that's very common in real life, "trust the experts," or "trust the professionals." There are two massive real-life modern examples of how negative commands fail when put out by the mass media. During the last US presidential campaign, the entire media basically screamed in unison, "Don't vote Donald Trump." They did very little to talk about why people should vote Hillary Clinton, understandable considering how corrupt and dishonest she is, and the result was President Trump. Here in the UK we had the exact same thing, though the unison among the media was slightly less one-sided. Politicians and their so-called expert associates in the world of economics, who are unable to predict the market 6 months down the line, never mind 30 years as they claim, they screamed to the public in unison not to vote for Brexit, and most of the media echoed those sentiments. But they were unable to tell us anything significantly positive about the EU itself, especially they couldn't tell us anything to look forward to by staying in. Result, Britain voted to leave, showing that people are much more resistant to media propaganda messages than the establishment anticipated, or at the very least, that negative commands don't work. So these are just some of the basic nuances of hypnotic language that They Live misses out on. Having said all that, filmmaking itself is an act of hypnosis, and Carpenter was at times extremely good at it. Movies use a form of complex hypnosis that's less about keywords and more to do with visual and auditory aesthetics, such as the red flare lighting in several They Live scenes. This adds a sense of subliminal danger regarding the two cop raids against the rebels. There's also multiple uses of screeching noises used to indicate the discomfort of seeing the unpleasant manipulation we're subjected to every day through the media. Sometimes these auditory punctuations are disguised as incidental sounds, like when Nada puts on the magic glasses for the first time, at which point our conscious attention is focused on the footage being unexpectedly black and white. And this is used again on the unexpected billboard sign. Note the use of a police siren when he first sees his large view of the city dominated by hypnotic signs. And we get police siren punctuation again when Nada is trying to get a replacement pair of glasses out of a garbage truck, but doesn't want to be seen. And again here as Frank takes the reality in. In other moments, high-pitched musical punctuation is used instead, but in a way that could almost be perceived as the screeches of nearby vehicles.
What's your problem?
This is good because it's bare minimalist music, yet it conveys, through aesthetic screeching discomfort, the anxiety of the situation for the characters. The notion of black and white vision equaling truth is interesting. We do often describe honest versions of events as being framed in black and white, and that's something that wasn't in the story until Carpenter's version. Something else that's actually missing from the film, but is in Carpenter's script, is that the glasses make the wearer's vision not just black and white, but, quote, flickering and grainy, end quote, like TV static, a TV transmission interrupted. In terms of trying to lend some plausibility to the mind control technology, this scene includes a set of diagrams and scientific explanations in the background. There's a brief moment or two where some of the words are readable for a moment, but for the most part this borders out of focus, allowing us to assume that the subliminal science of the alien signals are logically explained. The concept is silly, of course. How could a signal determine which precise objects in our visual perception are to be replaced, and with what? Actually, I think a better way of introducing the notion of a complex signal-to-brain process would have been to have this blackboard viewed by Nada in the church scenes early in the movie before he gets hold of the glasses. Inevitably, a movie that includes a plot framing of characters discovering subliminal messages, that raises the question, does the movie itself carry subliminal messages? In this case, I think it does. But as with Paul Verhoeven's movies RoboCop, Total Recall and Starship Troopers, the comical satire element serves as both a commercial box office draw and as a disguise for the intricate depths hiding beneath the veneer. I don't think They Live is quite as sophisticated or socially insightful under the surface as Verhoeven's three science fiction epics, but it comes close at times. However, and essential to my analysis, The film's capacity to stimulate viewer thought about social and political issues isn't always in accordance with the intentions of the filmmakers. In fact, it seems to bring up a lot of stuff accidentally. So let's put our film analysis glasses on